the President of the United States.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they here gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. And that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
It's far too short. Nothing else to say?
There's a reason why I started this video with the Gettysburg Address. To me, the 269 words of that address outline the power we as citizens have to create the kind of government that we, the people, want and need. And more importantly, the kind of government we, the people, deserve. I say this in response to a question that was put forward to candidates for the 2020 election by the Guam Daily Post, which asked, between public health, public safety, and public education and government accountability, what should be the government's top priority and why? When you look at the Organic Act that sets up the government of Guam, the government has three mandates clearly outlined: public safety, public education, and public health. Nowhere in the Organic Act does it mention anything about government accountability, although as far as I'm concerned, that is the most important part. Should be the number one priority of everybody, both elected official, appointed official, government employee, and citizens. Because accountability is the key to making the other three mandates, public health, public safety, and public education, work. Now, having said that, my view of government is very, very basic. That's why I'm inclined to call myself a Republican. Because government is supposed to serve the common good, not special interest. The common good are those areas where all residents have an equal stake in the services that our government provides. As an example, I myself am the beneficiary of a public education. I had an incredible education here, paid for by the taxpayers of Guam. And as a result of that education I got, I had a life that was beyond my wildest dreams. I went places I never thought I'd go. I did things I never thought I'd do. I had an incredible life as a result of the public education I got here on Guam. I believe that Guam needs a robust public health care system. And we have a strong health care system on Guam, but it could be stronger, and it needs to be stronger for a number of reasons. And I'll give you an example. For 25 years, I suffered from a chronic illness that doctors in Hawaii, California, Nevada, and Georgia could not diagnose. And in 2007, when I returned to Guam, it was diagnosed here. And the diagnosis and treatment allowed me to live from 2007 on without the level of chronic pain that I was suffering for the previous 30 years. That's because we have good people working in the healthcare system on Guam. And I spent a number of years working with the Non-Communicable Disease Consortium, a group of citizens, public and private, from medical and all walks of life, working together to help make Guam a healthier place. But having access to a strong public health care system and a strong public education system won't do any good for the people of Guam if they're afraid to leave their homes. And that's why I'm running for office. Because right now, politicians control the political process, not people. And the whole idea around politics is based on the concept, a rising tide lifts all boats. I don't have kids in school anymore, but my taxes help pay for the education of upcoming generations. My house is not on fire, but having trained firemen at the ready keeps my house safe too. And I'm not sick now, but having a strong public health care system keeps me from getting sick, as we are learning from the recent outbreaks of dengue fever and the COVID-19 virus. Our roads are a good thing to have, but I personally can't afford one. But by each of us contributing a little, we can all have great roads. That's the common good. Taking care of the common needs of everyone in sharing the cost burden is a little thing called politics. I guess you could say I believe in politics, I just don't believe in political parties. As we've seen over the last couple of elections, political party leaders are more concerned about gaining political power, gaining majority control, than serving the people. And right now there are a few politicians who are openly talking about canceling the primary election for the safety of the people. You can count on the political parties, both Democrat and Republican, to stop that effort. Because the primary election is one of the tools they use to limit the choices of candidates you get to select from. I and most new candidates running in 2020 would have liked to have run as independents, but the current laws don't allow that. We have to be a member of either the Republican or the Democrat Party to run in the primary election. And when you stop and think about it, based on Guam Election Commission statistics, 94% of voters have registered as independents. 4% are registered Democrats, 2% are registered Republicans. But politicians control the laws, and they've written the laws in such a way to prevent independent candidates from running for public office. Remember, incumbent politicians are the ones that write the law. And politicians like their power and control over the public checkbook and will do everything in their power to hold on to it. So watch a lot of sound and fury come from politicians about eliminating the primary election, saving taxpayers nearly $500,000, minimizing the chances of the COVID-19 spread, as we saw in the primary elections in a number of states. But at the end of the day, every attempt to stop the primary election will fail. What we have seen over the past 6 years is what happens when politicians forget they were elected to serve the people and get drunk on power. We were warned about this more than 200 years ago by Thomas Jefferson, who told us, and I quote, "It should not be surprising that sometimes public officials do not heed the voice of the people and go about doing what they wish, using their power and authority to enrich themselves and those closely allied to them." Over the years, we've seen a number of examples of politicians putting their personal financial security and safety over the people. Starting with the massive retroactive pay raises politicians gave themselves in secret session back in 2014, to handing out parcels of Chamorro Land Trust land on Barrigada Heights to themselves and family members, and a large number of current appointed and highly paid government officials who got themselves COVID pay bonuses working in housekeeping while tens of thousands of people were out of work. We have way too many incumbent politicians that make serving politically well-connected insiders more important than serving the people. How else can we explain millions of dollars of payments to companies without bids or signed contracts? How else can we explain highly paid government executives doing the work of $10 an hour housekeepers and getting bonus pay on top of it? How else can we explain that almost every politician in office today has broken the campaign promises they made on the campaign trail to get our vote? We can't. But there is a remedy, and Thomas Jefferson had a recommendation on how to deal with that as well. He said there is only one force in the nation that can be depended upon to keep the government pure and the politicians honest, and that is the people themselves. Every election we have an opportunity to change the government, and hopefully by changing the government, we change the direction the government is going, and it starts working harder towards making our lives better. This August, if the primary is not halted, we have our first chance to recreate the government from the top down to make it more sensitive to the needs of the people. There are a lot of new candidates running for public office, and we must vote for them over the incumbents, and I'll tell you why. When we elect a new candidate for public office, we have a 50-50 chance that candidate will be a public servant. But as we've seen over the course of the 35th and the 34th legislature, a lot of politicians got in, and as soon as they got in, they broke their campaign promises to us, and they went to serve politically well-connected insiders over serving the people. So when we elect certain incumbents, there's a 100% chance they don't care what happens to the people, because their loyalty first and foremost is to politically well-connected insiders. And we can't have that any longer. Right now we've got nearly 30,000 people out of work. We have an economy that's crashing. We have a government that's teetering on the edge of the financial cliff, about ready to go over following Puerto Rico. And still the politicians act as if there's nothing wrong. I've been watching the budget hearings, and not a single director has come up and asked for less money. They've all been asking for more money. Where is that money going to come from? There's only 44,662 households on Guam, although that number may change with the census data. And the average take-home for a household on Guam, 87% of households on Guam take home less than $50,000 a year, all sources of income combined. For the past 10 years, the inflation rate has boosted the cost of living up over 30%, but the money to pay those increased costs has not kept pace. We, the people, voted them into positions of power and authority in the first place, and it's time for us to be a little more careful about who we vote into office in the 2020 election. And going back to my 50-50 rule, there's a 50-50 chance that the new people will be good public servants, and that's great, because right now a majority of the people in the 35th legislature aren't. And if we, as citizens and voters, keep voting out the politicians after a couple of election cycles, we will have a legislature that's made up, has a substantial majority of public servants instead of politicians, and we'll finally see government begin to operate for the benefit of the people. My name is Ken Leon-Guerrero. I'm running as a Republican candidate for the 36th Guam legislature. You can find more information about me and the issues I'm most concerned about on my website right here, kenleonguerrero.org. Or you can call my cell phone, 727-3506, and leave a message. Or if you would like to support my campaign to make sure that the people's voice is heard every day on the floor of the legislature, and the concerns of the people are the number one concern in front of any piece of legislation submitted for consideration to the 36th legislature, you can vote for me. And if you would like to help support my campaign, you can go to my website. There's a donate button, and you can donate, because when you hit that button, it will take you to PayPal. Or you can mail a check to Ken Leon-Guerrero for Senator at P.O. Box 1741, Hagåtña, Guam, 96932. Remember, it's our government, but it only becomes our government if the people vote.